22 years. That's how long I gave Victor Romano every ounce of my sweat, my blood, my life. I helped him build 8 restaurants from nothing. And at 56, he threw me away like yesterday's trash. But what I found in a forgotten childhood savings account didn't just change my bank balance. It revealed a 40-year-old secret my parents took to their graves. My name is David Turner. Until 3 months ago, I was the operations manager for Romano Restaurant Group, a chain of Italian restaurants across Illinois that I helped build from a single storefront into an 8-location empire. I know every supplier, every recipe, every health code violation we ever fixed at 2 in the morning. I trained every manager, solved every crisis, and when Victor Romano's own family members stole from him, I was the one who quietly handled it to save him the embarrassment. I'm not telling you this story because I want pity. I'm telling you because sometimes life kicks you so hard you think you'll never get up, and then you discover your parents saw it coming 40 years ago and prepared a safety net you never knew existed. This is about more than money. This is about how 2 factory workers from Dayton understood something about value that a millionaire restaurant owner never could. My father Henry died in 2011. He worked 43 years at the Ford plant in Oak Ridge, never missed a day, never complained. My mother Helen passed 5 years later. She assembled circuit boards at Carter Works, her fingers nimble and precise, even at 70. They lived in the same 3-bedroom ranch house they bought in 1978. They drove used cars. They mowed their own lawn until the day they couldn't. And apparently, while they were clipping coupons and shopping sales, they were also orchestrating the greatest magic trick I've ever seen. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you what it feels like to give your entire adult life to someone else's dream, only to be told you're too old to matter anymore. Let me tell you about the morning I walked into a bank with nothing but desperation and walked out understanding my entire life differently. Most importantly, let me tell you why my parents, who never had more than $5,000 in their checking account at any given time, knew something about Warren Buffett that would one day save their son from complete ruin. This isn't just my story. It's the story of every person who's ever been told they've aged out of relevance. It's for everyone who's wondered if loyalty means anything anymore. And it's definitely for anyone who's ever underestimated their parents' wisdom, because it came wrapped in a brown bag lunch instead of a Harvard degree. So let me take you back to 3 months ago to the mahogany-paneled office where Victor Romano, the man who once called me his American son, explained why 56 years old was apparently the expiration date on my usefulness. His actual son, Nick, sat beside him, 28 years old, soft hands that had never scraped a grill or mopped a freezer at midnight, telling me about new directions and fresh perspectives while I stared at the picture on Victor's desk from our first restaurant opening where Im standing next to him. Both of us covered in flour and laughing because we'd just survived the lunch rush from hell with only 2 working burners. That photo was about to become evidence in the case for why some investments take longer to mature than others, and why my parents, may they rest in peace, were apparently financial prophets disguised as blue-collar workers who saved aluminum foil and reused Ziploc bags. I started working for Victor Romano when I was 35 years old. Back then, he had one small Italian restaurant called Mama Rosa's Table in downtown Dayton, right off Maple Street. The place seated 40 people if you squeezed them in, and the kitchen was so small you had to turn sideways to pass another person. But Victor had something special. He had his grandmother's recipes from Tuscany, and he had a dream bigger than that cramped dining room could hold. I met him through my cousin Mark, who delivered produce to restaurants. "This Italian guy needs help," Mark told me one Sunday at my mother's house. "His books are a disaster. His inventory is a mess. But David the man can cook, and he's got fire in his belly." I was working as an assistant manager at a hardware store, then making decent money but going nowhere. My wife Laura was pregnant with our son Ryan, and I needed something more. The first time I walked into Mama Rosa's Table, Victor was screaming at a supplier in Italian while simultaneously stirring 3 pots on the stove. He looked at me, pointed a sauce-covered wooden spoon in my direction, and said, "You the numbers guy Mark sent?" Can you start now? I got tax papers somewhere in that box. Maybe that one. Who knows? And the refrigerator delivery man wants a check, but I don't know if I have money in the account. That was Victor chaos and passion stirred together like his famous marinara sauce. I found his tax papers under a stack of meat invoices. His checking account had plenty of money. He just hadn't recorded any deposits for 3 months. By the end of that first day, I'd organized his disaster of an office, negotiated a better price with the refrigerator guy, and helped serve dinner when his waiter called in sick. "You stay," Victor declared at closing time, handing me a plate of the best lasagna I'd ever tasted. "I make you my operations manager." What's operations manager, I don't know. But you manage everything that isn't cooking deal. Laura understood why I said yes. "He believes in you," she said that night, her hand on her growing belly. "And you believe in him. That's rare, David. For 22 years, that belief drove everything I did. When Victor wanted to open a second location, I found the property, negotiated the lease, and supervised the renovation while still running the original restaurant. I trained every server to know that Mrs. Wilson liked her chicken parmigiana with extra sauce on the side, that Mr. Thompson was allergic to oregano, that the Andersons celebrated their anniversary every March 15th with a bottle of the same Chianti. My son Ryan grew up doing homework in restaurant booths. My daughter Lily learned to count by helping me inventory dinner rolls. Laura brought the kids for dinner every Friday, and Victor would come out of the kitchen flower in his gray hair, and boom. "These are my American grandchildren, Ryan. You're getting tall like a basketball player. Lily, beautiful like your mother." The business expanded year by year. The third restaurant opened when I was 42. The fourth and fifth came together when I was 47. Each time I was there from blueprint to grand opening. I knew which contractors wouldn't overcharge, which equipment would last, which neighborhoods would embrace an Italian restaurant. I created the training manuals, the inventory systems, the scheduling software that kept everything running. But more than systems, I managed the human disasters. When Victor's nephew Mario started skimming from the register at location number 3, I caught him and handled it quietly. When the head chef at location number 5 had a breakdown and disappeared with a week's worth of meat, I stepped into the kitchen myself and cooked for 3 days straight until we found a replacement. When Victor's brother-in-law tried to sue him over some imagined slight, I was the one who mediated at 200 in the morning in Victor's living room. "David, you're not just my employee," Victor would say during our late-night strategy sessions. "You're family. This empire, we're building, it's for all of us. My children, your children, were creating something that lasts." I believed him. God help me, I believed every word. When my father died and I needed 3 days off for the funeral, Victor came to the service, stood next to me at the grave, and said, "Henry raised a good son. He would be proud of what you've built." When my mother got sick 5 years later, Victor sent food to the hospice every day. "Family takes care of family," he said. By my 56th birthday, we had 8 restaurants employing over 200 people. I knew every one of their names, their kids' names, their stories. I thought I was building something permanent, something that mattered. I thought loyalty and dedication added up to security. I was wrong about Victor. But as it turned out, I was also wrong about my parents, who were playing a longer game than any of us could see. 3 weeks after my 56th birthday, everything changed. It was a Tuesday morning in March, unseasonably cold, and I arrived at the flagship restaurant at 7:30 like always. I was reviewing the previous night's receipts when Victor's secretary Marie called. "Mr. Romano wants to see you in his office. Nick will be there too." Nick, Victor's youngest son, fresh out of Wharton Business School, had been hanging around the restaurants for the past 6 months. He wore $1,000 suits and carried a leather portfolio everywhere, taking notes on his tablet while watching the rest of us work. He'd never rolled a single piece of silverware into napkins, never stayed past 9 at night, never faced down an angry customer or a broken freezer on a Saturday night. But he had opinions about everything. I walked into Victor's office at the new corporate building we'd leased the previous year. He sat behind his massive oak desk, the one it helped him pick out at an estate sale. Nick lounged in the leather chair beside him, scrolling through his phone. The walls were covered with photos from our restaurant openings over the years. In every single one, I was right there beside Victor. David. My friend Victor began, and immediately I knew something was wrong. In 22 years, he'd never called me friend with that particular tone, like he was apologizing for something that hadn't happened yet. "Please sit down." I sat. Nick put his phone away and opened his portfolio, pulling out a stack of papers with colorful graphs. "Mr. Turner, I've been conducting a comprehensive analysis of our operations." He began, not even letting his father speak. "We need to discuss restructuring." "Restructuring?" I looked at Victor, but he was staring at his hands. "Victor, last month you told me profits were up 30%. We're about to open number 8 in Hillside. The business model needs updating." Nick continued. "We're implementing digital ordering systems, social media marketing campaigns, influencer partnerships. The restaurant industry has evolved beyond traditional management structures. I can learn new systems." I said, my mouth suddenly dry. "Victor, you know I always adapt. Remember when we switched to computerized inventory, I mastered it in a week." Victor finally looked up, and his eyes were empty of the warmth I'd known for over 2 decades. "David, you're too old for this business now. These young people, they speak a different language. Instagram, this, TikTok, that. Nick understands this world. Too old." The words hit me like ice water. "I'm 56, not 76. I work 70 hours a week. Last Tuesday, when the main refrigeration unit failed at location 2, who fixed it at midnight? Last month, when the health inspector showed up for a surprise inspection at location 6, who handled it?" "That's exactly the point," Nick interjected. "We don't need someone fixing refrigerators anymore. We need someone who understands data analytics, conversion rates, digital engagement metrics." I stood up, my legs shaking. "Victor, I created the systems that run every one of your restaurants. I trained every manager. When your own family members stole from you, I protected you." "Don't be dramatic," Victor said, waving his hand dismissively. "This is business. You knew this day would come." "Did I?" I asked quietly. "When you called me family, when you stood at my father's funeral, when you promised we were building something together." Nick slid a paper across the desk. 2 weeks severance for each year of service. 44 weeks pay. It's very generous." I looked at the termination agreement, effective immediately. After 22 years, I wouldn't even get to say goodbye to the staff. My hands trembled as I read the non-compete clause preventing me from working at any restaurant within 50 miles for 2 years. "You're blackballing me from the only industry I know," I said quietly. "That's standard," Nick replied. "Sign here and here." I looked at Victor one more time. "You told me I was like a son to you." He shrugged, the gesture so casual it felt like violence. "I have sons. Real sons. Business is business, David." I signed the papers. What choice did I have? 44 weeks of pay seemed like a fortune for 5 minutes, until I remembered Ryan's college tuition, Lily's orthodontist, Bill's the mortgage that still had 15 years left. I walked out of that office with a check that would last maybe 6 months if we were extremely careful, and a non-compete agreement that made me unemployable in the only field where I had expertise. The security guard Tommy, who had hired 3 years earlier, couldn't meet my eyes as he watched me clean out my desk. 22 years fit into one cardboard box. As I walked to my car, I saw Nick through the window, already sitting in what had been my office, his feet up on my desk, talking on his phone and laughing. Telling Laura was the hardest thing I'd ever done. She was folding laundry when I came home at 11 Hosero in the morning, something I'd never done in over 2 decades. She took one look at my face and the cardboard box in my hands, and the basket of towels dropped to the floor. "He fired you?" she whispered, sinking onto the couch. "Victor fired you." I sat beside her and explained everything. the meeting. Nick's graphs, the non-compete clause that essentially banned me from working in restaurants. Laura didn't cry at first. She just stared at the wall where Wed hung a photo from Victor's 65th birthday party, the one where he had his arm around me raising a glass to the best operations manager in Illinois. "Well, figure it out," she finally said, but her voice was hollow. "You'll find something else." For 2 weeks I tried. I sent out dozens of RSUMs. Every restaurant job was off limits due to the non-compete. I applied for management positions in retail manufacturing logistics. The responses were all variations of the same theme: we've decided to go with a candidate whose experience better matches our needs. Translation: someone younger. One hiring manager, more honest than the others, actually told me the truth during a phone screening. "Look, David, you're clearly qualified, but honestly, my boss won't hire anyone over 50. He thinks they can't adapt to our corporate culture." Our savings dwindled faster than I'd imagined. Ryan called from college, excited about a summer internship opportunity that required him to pay for housing in Chicago $3,000 we didn't have. Lily needed new soccer cleats and her tournament fees. The car started making an expensive sound. The water heater gave up entirely. One morning, after another sleepless night calculating and recalculating our finances, I was going through my mother's papers, looking for any bonds or forgotten assets we could liquidate. She'd kept everything in an old filing cabinet in the basement, organized in her precise handwriting tax returns from the 1970s. My report cards from elementary school, every birthday card we'd ever given her. That's when I found it. A small yellow envelope marked David Turner, First National Bank, 1986. Inside was a passbook for a savings account I'd completely forgotten existed. I remembered that day suddenly crystal clear. I was 15, had just gotten my first real paycheck from my summer job at Henderson's Hardware, $20 for a week of stocking shelves. My grandfather, Harold, my mother's father, had driven me to First National Bank in his ancient Buick that smelled like pipe tobacco and peppermints. "Every man needs his own money," Grandpa Harold had said, his thick fingers guiding mine as I filled out the deposit slip. "This account is yours. Don't touch it until you really need it. Understand? Not for a car, not for a girl, not for anything except a real emergency." I deposited that $20 and promptly forgot about it. Life happened. College, marriage, kids. Victor's restaurants. The account had been sitting there for 40 years. Looking at our current situation with bills piling up and no income coming in, I figured maybe the account had grown to a few hundred with interest. Maybe 1,000 if I was incredibly lucky. Even a few hundred would buy groceries for a couple of weeks. First National Bank had been bought by Illinois Trust in the 1990s, then by Midwest Savings in 2010. The original building on Maple Street had been renovated beyond recognition, all glass and chrome, where brick and marble used to be. I walked in feeling foolish, carrying a 40-year-old passbook like some kind of relic. The teller, a young woman named Megan, with perfectly styled hair and manicured nails, looked at the passbook like I'd handed her an artifact from an archaeological dig. "Oh, wow. This is seriously vintage." "I know it's old," I said, embarrassed. "The account probably doesn't even exist anymore." No, these old accounts are totally still valid. They just require special handling." "Let me get my manager, she loves this stuff." Linda Howard. The branch manager appeared within minutes. She was probably in her 40s, professional but kind, the sort of person who actually looked at you when she talked. She examined the passbook carefully, running her finger along the account number. "Mr. Turner, this is fascinating. These old First National accounts are rare. Let me look this up in our legacy system." She led me to her office, a quiet space away from the main banking floor. "Account number 0048711986. Let's see what we have here." She typed carefully, navigating what looked like an ancient computer interface, all green text on a black screen. Then she stopped typing. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. "Is there a problem?" I asked, my heart sinking. "Is the account closed?" "No." "Mr. Turner," she said slowly, "the account is very much active, but there's something unusual here, something I've never seen before." Linda Howard stared at her computer screen, then looked at me, then back at the screen. She pulled off her reading glasses and cleaned them as if that might change what she was seeing. "Mr. Turner, this account has an automatic investment program attached to it," Linda Howard said slowly. "That's extremely unusual for a 1986 savings account, especially one opened for a minor." I leaned forward. "I just deposited $20 when I was 15. That's all I ever put in." "No, sir. There were additional deposits." She turned her monitor slightly so I could see the green text on the black screen. $6 every month from 1986 to 2011. The deposits came from account holder Henry Turner. Then from 2011 to 2016, 12 monthly from Helen Turner. My parents. I felt my throat tighten. They never mentioned this to me, not once. "That's not the unusual part," Linda continued, her voice taking on a tone of amazement. "These deposits weren't just sitting in savings. They were automatically routed to a brokerage account that purchased the same stock every single month for 40 years. Mr. Turner, do you know what Berkshire Hathaway is?" The room seemed to tilt. "Warren Buffett's company, exactly. Your parents were buying fractional shares of Berkshire Hathaway Class A stock every month since 1986. Do you have any idea what those shares were worth then versus now?" I gripped the arms of my chair. "I know they were maybe $2,000 in the 80s. $250 per share in 1986 to be exact," Linda said, typing rapidly. "Now, your $6 monthly investment bought fractional shares, but they accumulated over time. Mr. Turner, one share of Berkshire Hathaway Class A is currently trading at $543,000. That can't be right. It's absolutely right." She hit print and pages began flowing from her printer. "Your account purchased fractional shares every month for 40 years. The compound growth, the stock splits that never happened because Buffett doesn't believe in splits, the accumulation over time." She pulled the pages from the printer and spread them across her desk. "Mr. Turner, your current account balance is $4,105,427.50. I stared at the number. It didn't look real. Nothing about this looked real. "There's been a mistake. My parents worked factory jobs. My dad assembled car parts. My mom put together circuit boards. They clipped coupons." "The Social Security numbers match," Linda said gently. "These deposits definitely came from your parents. But there's more. There's a sealed letter in our vault attached to this account. The instructions say it can only be opened when you access the account. Would you like me to get it?" I nodded, unable to speak. Linda left and returned with a yellowed envelope. My name was written on it in my mother's careful cursive. Inside was a letter dated June 15, 1986, and at the bottom a second note added in 2011 in my father's shaky handwriting. The first part in my mother's hand read, "Dear David, if you're reading this, you've hit a hard time. We know because we set this up so you could only access it when you truly needed it. Not for a car or a vacation, but when life knocks you down. Your father's cousin Harold works at a bank in Toledo. He told us about this man, Warren Buffett, who thinks differently about money. Harold said, this Buffett fellow buys companies and holds them forever, that he believes in patience over flash. Your father and I don't understand all of it, but we understand this good things grow slowly. Trees children love, and apparently money invested wisely. Every $6 we put away came from somewhere, one less lunch out walking instead of driving when gas was high, fixing things instead of replacing them. We did it because we know the world can be cruel. We know that sometimes good, hardworking people get thrown away. If that happens to you, remember that your value isn't determined by what anyone else thinks. You are our greatest investment, Love, Mom. The second note, added 25 years later in my father's handwriting, was shorter. Still adding money every month, son. Buffett was right about patience. Your mother thinks we should tell you, but I say no. You don't need it yet. You're doing great with Victor, but if you ever do need it, remember that we always knew you were worth more than anyone could pay you. Dad. 2011. Linda handed me a tissue. I hadn't realized I was crying until the tears hit the papers. Mr. Turner, there's also a note in the system from the investment side, she said. Your parents specifically chose Berkshire Hathaway. Never diversified, never sold a single share. They bought through every recession, every boom, every bust, 40 years of $6 and $12 purchases. They lived so simply, I whispered. They could have used this money. Maybe they thought you were a better investment than anything they could have bought, Linda said softly. I sat in my car outside the bank for an hour, holding that letter, reading it over and over. My parents, who never took a vacation that required a plane ticket, who celebrated their anniversary at the same local steakhouse every year, who wore clothes until they literally fell apart, had been secretly building me a fortune, $6 and $12 at a time. The irony wasn't lost on me. Victor Romano, who drove a Mercedes and wore a Rolex, who constantly talked about building an empire, had thrown me away because he thought my value had expired. Meanwhile, my parents, who drove used Fords and wore Timex watches, had bet everything on the principle that value compounds over time. When I finally went home and told Laura, she collapsed on the kitchen floor, sobbing. Not from sadness, but from relief and amazement. Ryan drove home from college that night. Lily kept asking, "Is this real? Is this actually real?" We sat around the dining room table until 3:00 in the morning, reading my parents' letter out loud again and again, laughing and crying at the same time. But the money was only part of the revelation. The real gift was understanding what my parents had known all along. They'd invested in Warren Buffett, yes, but more importantly, they'd understood his philosophy. Value investing isn't about quick returns or flashy gains. It's about recognizing true worth and having the patience to let it grow. 2 weeks later, I opened my own restaurant. Nothing fancy, nothing like Victor's places with their imported marble and custom furniture. I found a small space in Fairfield, the kind of neighborhood place that had good bones but needed love. I named it Henry and Helen's and hung my parents' picture by the entrance. I hired Susan first. Victor had fired her 6 months before me, told her 62 was too old to run a kitchen. She cried when I offered her the job. Then came Luis, 58, who Victor's son Nick had replaced with someone who knew more about Instagram than insulation. Betty, 67, had been let go from another restaurant for being too slow with technology. She memorized every customer's name and preference within a week. We opened quietly. No social media blitz, no influencer events, just good food fair prices and people who actually cared about what they were doing. Susan's pasta was poetry. Luis kept everything running like a Swiss watch. Betty made every customer feel like they were eating at their grandmother's table. Word spread the way it used to before algorithms and hashtags. One customer telling another. Families coming in, then coming back, then bringing friends. Within 3 months, we had a 45-minute wait on Friday nights. Nick Romano showed up 6 months after we opened. He stood in the doorway of my packed restaurant, looking smaller than I remembered. His digital revolution had failed spectacularly. 3 of their 8 restaurants had closed. The ones remaining were struggling. "My father wants to know if you'd consider coming back," he said, having to raise his voice over the happy dinner crowd. "He's willing to discuss terms." I looked around my restaurant. Susan was teaching our newest cook, a 23-year-old named Adam, how to properly season the sauce. Luis was fixing a customer's wobbly chair while chatting with them in Spanish. Betty was bringing out a surprise birthday cake for Mr. Wilson, our regular, who ate dinner alone every Thursday. Tell Victor thanks, but I'm too old for his business, I said. I'm exactly the right age for mine. Nick left without ordering. I heard later that 2 more Romano restaurants closed within the year. Victor retired to Florida, his empire reduced to just the original Mama Rosa's table now run by his nephew. Meanwhile, Henry and Helen's thrives. We're not an empire. We're just one restaurant that does things right. My parents would have loved it not because of the success, but because of the philosophy behind it. We invest in people not despite their age, but because of it. We value wisdom, patience, and loyalty, the things that actually appreciate over time. The $4 million, most of it is still invested, still growing, because my parents taught me the most valuable lesson of all wealth isn't about what you can spend. It's about what you can build, what you can pass on, what you can become when someone believes you're worth the investment. Sometimes the greatest fortune isn't finding money you didn't know existed. It's discovering that someone loved you enough to plant trees whose shade they'd never enjoy, believing absolutely that someday when you needed it most, you'd understand your value was never determined by anyone's opinion, but was always there, quietly growing, waiting for the perfect moment to bloom. If you enjoyed this story, please like this video. Share it with someone who needs to hear that their value only increases with time. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more stories about ordinary people discovering extraordinary truths. Remember, sometimes the best investment isn't in the stock market, but in believing someone's worth more than the world tells them they are. Until next time, this is David's story, but it might just be yours.